Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is Shaila Akhtar, Assistant Professor English. This class is prepared for the students of Honours Third Year, and the subject of our today's class is Introduction to Linguistics. And the topic we are going to discuss today is the Sapir Whorf Hypothesis, and this will be our third lecture on sociolinguistics. My dear students, before turning to our topic, that means the Sapir Whorf hypothesis, let's try to remember the basics of sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics is the study of language in relation to society, and sociolinguistics is that branch of linguistics which studies the reasons behind people using different language varieties in different social settings, the influence of different cultural factors determining language style, and how language becomes a social behavior from an individual behavior. So, the points we get from this, we can consider it in the following way. Sociolinguistics is concerned with language in social and cultural context. Sociolinguistics study socio-cultural variation in language use, and it investigates how social structure influences the way people talk. Now, the subject matters of sociolinguistics: interdependency and interrelationship between society and language, nature and cause of language variation, various effective factors of language variations, nature of mixed varieties of language, and relationship between language and cognitive thinking. So, to clarify the term cognitive thinking, we have to know what is the meaning of the very word cognitive. So, to define the very word cognitive, we can say cognitive is mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and senses. So, we can say relationship between language and cognitive thinking means the relationship between language and the mental process of acquiring knowledge through a specific language. And to describe this point, relationship between language and cognitive thinking, we can use the very topic of our today, that means the Sapir Whorf hypothesis. So, in a very short way, we can tell that Sapir Whorf hypothesis is a concept that describes the relationship between language and cognitive thinking, or the mental process of acquiring knowledge. The Sapir Whorf hypothesis. This hypothesis was for the first time discussed by Edward Sapir in 1929 and later by his student and colleague Benjamin Whorf in 1956. And the Sapir Whorf hypothesis states that certain thoughts of an individual in one language cannot be understood by the people of another language, and the native languages strongly affect the way of thinking of people. This hypothesis became popular in the 1950s following posthumous publication of Whorf's writing on the subject, And after strong criticisms from the followers of Noam Chomsky in the following decades, this hypothesis loses its ground greatly, and now most of the linguists consider this theory only as a weaker version of the original, that language can have some little effect on thought. Now let's know about linguistic relativity or Whorfianism. So, Sapir Whorf hypothesis or Whorfianism is a concept in linguistics and cognitive science, that means the science related to the mental process of learning, which believes that the structure and vocabulary of a language affects the worldview of its users. That is, language determines our way of thinking. So, the main principles of the Whorfianism or Sapir-Whorf hypothesis are linguistic relativity and linguistic determinism. So, if we want to describe linguistic relativity, we can tell that the structural differences between languages affect the cognition of the native speakers of the languages. That means people who speak different languages perceive and think about the world quite differently. And linguistic categories and usage influence thoughts and certain kinds of non-linguistic behavior. Now, linguistic determinism or the strong version. The structure of one language strongly determines its speaker's worldview. That is, our thinking or cognition is determined by our language. That means language determines our thought, and linguistic categories limit and determine cognitive categories. So our language shapes our reality. For example, we can say that the English word nurse refers to a woman trained to provide care for the sick. So according to the English language, we get our view about the nurse, and we can hardly imagine that a man may have the desire to be a nurse. Thus, our language compels us to think nurse as a female personality. So, between these two versions, the strong and the weak, the most accepted one is the weaker version or the hypothesis related to the linguistic relativity. And according to this hypothesis, language only somewhat form our thinking and behavior in certain cases. Now, moderate Orphianism. As we have discussed earlier, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is generally understood as having two different versions, the strong version and the weak version. And the strong version is known as the version related to linguistic determinism, and the weak version is related to the linguistic relativity. So, according to the strong version, our language determines our thought. Linguistic categories limit one's cognitive categories. And according to the weak version, our language influences our thought, and linguistic categories affect one's cognitive categories. So many modern researchers have rejected the strong Whorfian view that our language determines our thought, and they have suggested a weak view that our language affects or influences not determines our thinking. And this weaker version is now termed as the moderate Orphianism. My dear students, now let's know how we can consider Sapir Whorf hypothesis as a mold theory. There are two opposite views regarding language and our thought, and they are known as the mold theory and the clock theory. According to the mold theory, our language molds or determines our thought, and according to the clock theory, our language is just as a clock or an outer garment which conforms to our way of thinking. So the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is a mold theory because it strongly tells about the linguistic determinism. That means the structure of one language strongly determines its speaker's worldview. Using an example, we can make it clear. So as for example, we can say we have 7 colors in our vocabulary. So our thoughts and even our dreams limited with these colors. We have the only word snow for snow, but the people of the winter countries have words for so many varieties of snowfall. So they can imagine several features of snow. Our own vocabulary determines our worldview. Unless we know a word, we cannot think or imagine anything about it, even when the object is just beside us. So we can say that Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is a mold theory, and the linguistic determinism or the strong version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is the part of mold theory. So my dear students, I have to stop here today, and very soon we will be together with another class again. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you.